Well, hello and welcome to the 2022 Passionistas Summit. This is the Power of Transformation panel. I'm your host, Kylee Stone. It gives me an enormous pleasure and it's a real privilege actually here today to be able to host this particular panel, something that I'm deeply passionate about. I'm here in Sydney, Australia, and it is customary here, which I'm absolutely delighted to say, that as an Aboriginal woman, often when we start an event, we do like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land. So I would like to start with acknowledging and paying my respects to the traditional owners and to any elders past and present, Aboriginal, Torres Strait Islander, Indigenous peoples and First Nations, wherever you are living, working from today, acknowledge and pay my respects. I would also like to start today by acknowledging the co-founders of the Passionistas project, Amy and Nancy Harrington, for really the extraordinary work that they've done in creating this event, creating this movement, and doing what they've done to bring together such an extraordinary group of people. As I was thinking about today's session, I think the first thing that struck me is, like many things, what does transformation really even mean? If we look up transformation, the simple reference to transformation is something like a radical, extreme, or dramatic change. And it's often in some character or appearance, something or someone, usually for improvement or making something better. But when we talk about human transformation, we're not talking about the change of things necessarily externally. What we're talking about is an internal shift that provides a clear pathway for people to live up to their full potential and to live their lives with greater purpose, clarity, and passion, which is perfect considering that we're all here really expressing our own passion. Certainly for me, the power of transformation is one of my passions, but specifically my passion for the impact it has on our ability to create an entirely new paradigm of leadership. Personally, for me, I got my own, transformation in that area. I got my first leadership role when I was 27, and in 2005 at 32, I landed my dream job. I got an executive position on the senior leadership team working for the world's biggest media organization. I really felt like I'd made it as a leader. Then 2 years into the job, I had my first child. And by 2010, which was 3 years after that, I'd had 3 kids. And suddenly everything changed for me. I could not see how to make it work with having 3 kids. I thought I must be crazy. And no sooner had I negotiated a part-time job, I was sitting in my office outside the executive boardroom, and when all the team started walking in for the meeting, I wasn't invited. And I noticed that's not all right. So I was annoyed, frustrated, and really resigned about my position there as a leader. And I was standing outside the coffee shop, actually, and I had a colleague ask me about how I was. I really thought, I'm not going to hold back here. I said, you know what? I'm really pissed off. She said, what do you mean? I said, well, suddenly now that I'm part-time, I don't fit the mold for senior leadership. Me too, she said. And I thought, really? So clearly I wasn't alone. And honestly, it really fired me up. 6 weeks later, I had over 53 women in a group, every single one of them are senior women in leadership, emerging leaders, all dealing with the very same problem. How do we advance as leaders despite all of these obstacles, despite the lack of flexibility, the imbalance of women in leadership, the imposter syndrome, so many different issues that we were dealing with? And the thing that really struck me, we were sitting in this room, every single one of us, some were on a call, some of us in the same room. And there was this one woman who I'd known for years who was sharing about the 3 reasons why she was in this group. And every single one of them had one very similar and common thread. And as this woman turned around and said, I just don't feel confident. I honestly couldn't believe it. This is somebody who's traveled the world, one of the most senior journalists, had created an extraordinary career. And at that moment, I took a good look for myself. Was this confidence something that was actually preventing me from also fulfilling on the thing that I was truly passionate about? I've had an extraordinary career as a leader. I accomplished extraordinary things, not only in my career in the media industry, which I did for 23 years, I had the courage to leap out, start a business. 3 months after starting that group, we had this extraordinary event where we brought all these women together, sharing incredible stories. And then 6 months after that, did it again. We had 270 people at this event, and it just was incredible. But as I stood back and looked at the lessons that I learned, there was something for me personally that really made a difference for my own transformation. And surprisingly, it happened after, confronting a particular challenge in my own life. I'd come home from a 12-hour day of facilitating, and as I walked in the door, I confronted the state of the house. It was just a mess, and I was exhausted, and I was really fed up with feeling like I'm trying to do all my best, and every time I come home, there was just so much for me to deal with. So within 2 weeks, I'd taken off to New York, and I remember sitting at the Guggenheim. I'd had a whole day doing the rounds at these art museums, and it was the reflection of different artists that I remember from school that took me back. And I thought, you know what, I used to be really passionate about art. I loved art, and then I never did anything about it. And as I was sitting there overlooking Central Park, I was a mess. I could not hold back my tears. I thought, whatever happened to my passion? I had lost it. I had never gone and pursued the thing that I was truly passionate about. And so as I started to look about what happened, I noticed that, in the first 6 years of my schooling, I went to 6 different schools. And every time I went to a different school, I didn't stay true to what I was passionate about. My number one intention was, what can I do to make friends? So I'd go to one school, I'd look for what they were doing. I'd join the band because they were in the band. And then the next school, I'd join the athletics because the people that I made friends with were in the athletics. But year after year, I would just keep changing to fit in with what I thought was what other people thought was the right thing to be doing. All the meanwhile, giving up on the things that I was truly passionate about. But now here I am, some 40 years later, and I've finally realized that my view of leadership was nothing but an illusion. I took the traditional path, get a good education, get a good job, go to university, work harder, further your studies, get a promotion, then you get a pay rise, and then, eventually one day you become a leader, and I thought I'd made it. But that view of leadership was nothing but an illusion that was holding me back from actually expressing the thing that I was deeply passionate about. And what I was deeply passionate about was actually creating a meaningful connection where the things that were important to me were actually able to be expressed. And the other thing I discovered about leadership is that I'm not alone, and it's not about being a lone soldier, and that surrounding myself with other people who have a commitment to something far bigger than themselves was the thing that made the biggest difference for me. So for me, a leader has become something that's got nothing to do with the position that we have. It has nothing to do with the title. It has nothing to do with the credentials. And although all of those things make a big difference to furthering our own knowledge, it's not the thing that has us express leadership in the world. So my mission really has become about empowering people to actually create, themselves as a leader, to discover that actually real leadership starts from within and within us. And it comes to our ability to be able to show up in every moment, in every day, in every relationship. For me now, leadership is how I show up in my conversations with my kids. It shows up in how I have conversations with the guy at the coffee shop. It shows up in my ability to, with the colleagues I'm with at work. Every single thing in every moment of every day is an opportunity for me to show up as somebody who expresses their passion and to make a real difference in the world. So if there's one thing I leave you with in my personal story, it is this quote from Margaret Mead. And it is that you never underestimate the power of a small group of committed people to change the world, because in fact, it is the only thing that ever has.